right, red light. Time to text and shave and whittle and floss.
Thanks for getting here so quickly. I'm late for a meeting. Can I just give you $20 to drop me off?
Wow,
Just a fucking dog. Just a dog. A fun.
This person is using a shovel to press straw into the sandy soil, creating square grid patterns.
そう、私誰か持ってたらそれでいいや。こう貼ってくれる人がね、持ってるのって持ってくれてたらそれで納得する。なんかみんなが持ってくれてたら私が持ってるみたいな気分になっちゃうからね。
Please come in when this is
次ね。
over.
あれ
クエスト完了ボタンわからなった W。
クエスト完了ボタン。ああ、そうね、時々わからなくなっちゃう。OK。Thank you。もうちょっと待ってね。ピクちゃんいらないんですかこれ。もう、私もらっちゃっていいの？ありがとう。もらっちゃったからね。
There are all sorts of things to discover. You may even find a lonely man who will give you a unique item for free. Each in-game mechanic needs to have a pinnacle in-game encounter. The most difficult content in Path of Exile 2.
I've covered some of the PoE2 keystones in videos about their particular section on the tree, but not all of them. So this video will serve as a full overview of every keystone that will be on the tree for PoE2's early access launch, showing where they're located and discussing exactly how they work. So here we are on the footage that I recorded in my playtime in Los Angeles, and we're beginning with Resolute Technique, which is unchanged from Path of Exile 1. Your hits can't be evaded, never deal critical strikes. This keystone makes it so that the accuracy hit check calculation is bypassed because the enemy cannot evade your attacks. As long as the attack makes contact, it will hit, but at the cost of preventing you from dealing any critical strikes. Blood magic has changed a little bit and is also moved quite significantly on the tree, now finding itself at an equal distance from the strength and strength int starting locations. This one removes all of your mana and makes skills cost life instead of mana. It doesn't grant 10% more life like it does in PoE 1. This one is very interesting considering that all characters will now have their entire mana pool, as reservations now use spirit instead of mana. It's hard to say exactly how useful blood magic will be without knowing how difficult it is to manage standard mana skill costs in the endgame. Next up we have Avatar of Fire, which has slightly moved towards the outer side of the tree but remains in the strength aligned area. Avatar of Fire has changed a bit from PoE 1, making 75% of all damage types be converted to fire while preventing you from dealing any non-fire damage. This means that it will also convert chaos damage too, which is new in PoE 2. We know that damage conversion scales differently in PoE 2. You can only scale the portion of converted damage with modifiers that affect fire damage dealt. The downside modifier of preventing non-fire damage on this keystone means that you'll need to find the remaining 25% conversion before you take the keystone to prevent losing a chunk of damage. But overall, this keystone has a lot of potential to completely convert any damage type over to fire and allow abilities to be played in completely different builds. Giant's Blood has been a fan favourite since the moment it was leaked from the Tokyo Game Show a few months back, and we're finally able to get the confirmed wording on this one. You can wield two-handed axes, maces and swords in one hand. Double attribute requirements of weapons. So this keystone is confirmed to not double the level requirement of two-handed weapons, as I had speculated may be the case in previous videos, and you can dual wield two-handed weapons. But to do so, you'll need a mammoth amount of attributes, particularly strength. This keystone is such a fun one, and it's hard to say how strong this is without knowing how accessible attributes will be, or how high the standard attribute requirements are on the top tier two-handed weapons. But if PoE 1 is anything to go by, You may need somewhere in the region of 850 strength if you want to dual wield the highest level 2-hand maces. That's a lot of strength, but there is a very big difference in what is gained from attributes going into PoE2, where you not only gain a lot more life from strength, but you also have extremely limited life scaling on the passive skill tree, making this investment into strength a lot more useful than just satisfying the Giant's Blood requirements. I expect to see some fun builds using this one. Next up we have Unwavering Stance, which has moved a little bit closer to the edge of the tree. This is a really interesting keystone with a massive trade-off. You can no longer make use of the dodge roll, but your stun threshold is doubled. Now, from everything we know about PoE2's endgame bosses, the dodge roll is going to be an extremely important factor in staying alive. But this keystone seems to suggest that it may be possible to tank some of those very dangerous abilities given the correct setup. Stun threshold is based on a character's maximum life, so this keystone naturally pairs well with a character that is investing a lot into life scaling, such as one using the aforementioned Giant's Blood keystone. We're also not sure just yet how difficult it will be to invest into defense against stuns. We don't know if stun immunity will even exist. Bulwark's location is exactly opposite Unwavering Stance, which is fitting considering it also modifies the dodge roll, but these two keystones can't be used together. Instead of disabling the dodge roll, Bulwark makes it so that you lose your avoidance frames at the beginning of the dodge roll and you'll no longer avoid those incoming projectiles or strikes. In return, you'll take 30% less damage while dodge rolling. Okay, this one actually seems to be very good for a few reasons. One is the location on the tree. Many builds here will have good life scaling and decent recovery, which pairs well with consistent mitigation. But something really important to mention about Bulwark is that the 30% less damage from hits should be present for the full duration of the dodge roll, not just the avoidance part of the roll towards the beginning. Add to that the fact that this keystone makes it so that your dodge roll can now be used to help mitigate the damage of any incoming area effect hits that previously couldn't be avoided with a dodge roll, and I can actually see this keystone being picked up quite a bit. Iron Reflexes is unchanged from PoE1 and finds itself in a very similar place on the passive skill tree as well. This one converts all of your evasion rating into armor, preventing you from evading but improving mitigation against physical hits. However, there is something important to mention here about conversion in PoE2. We know that damage conversion will work differently, in that it will no longer remember its origin types and therefore will only scale with modifiers that affect the end type. One would assume that the same conversion system would exist across all mechanics in the game, and that would mean that the portion of armor you gain from converted evasion wouldn't scale from any increased evasion modifiers, and would instead only be affected by modifiers that would affect armor. Glancing Blows has moved all the way to the lower side of the tree and has been restored to its original pre-nerf state. Block chance is doubled, but you take 50% of damage from blocked hits. By default, a blocked hit does no damage, but this keystone will help in being able to more consistently block incoming hits thanks to having a higher block chance, at the cost of now taking half of the damage from those hits. But there's something important to be mentioned with Glancing Blows, and that's the new active block mechanic in PoE2. If you're using active block, you probably don't want to use Glancing Blows, because this keystone will make you take 50% of the damage of incoming hits, even though you already have a 100% chance to block hits from the front during the raised shield animation. With that said, however, Glancing Blows is still a great keystone to boost passive block gained from your shield or other stats. And keep in mind that a blocked hit also prevents any on-hit effects such as ailment application, even if that hit deals damage due to Glancing Blows. The true power of Glancing Blows though has always been when it's combined with recovery on block, so we'll have to wait and see if those kinds of modifiers exist in PoE2. Next up we have Oasis, which finds itself in the middle of the strength, dex and dexterity starting areas. This keystone prevents the use of charms but grants more recovery from blasts. Now, charms are a new equipment slot which functions in a very similar way to blast, using charges to automatically activate on a certain condition, such as taking cold damage. Importantly, charms can also be used to help solve ailments like bleeding or freeze, activating upon receiving the ailment to immediately remove that ailment. This keystone prevents their use entirely, and I'm not convinced that the upside is strong enough to justify it. One consideration here may be mana flasks, as we know that Mind Over Matter has a lot of potential, but the location on the tree for Oasis doesn't lend itself well in a Mind Over Matter build. Vile Pact finds itself moved towards the left side of the bottom of the tree, and it now makes all Life Leech instant but prevents the use of Life Flasks. We know that Leech is being simplified in PoE2 to always leech a percentage of damage dealt, whilst the limiting factor will now be how much leech resistance a monster has. Instant Life Leech will still be a very strong modifier to have, but the trade-off here is that you need to kind of always be dealing damage in order to recover that life, as you won't be able to use your Life Flask in situations where you're required to stop attacking and move out of the way. One notable change from PoE1's version of this keystone is that life regeneration is still in play for the character, so it's possible that you could forego the Life Flask entirely and just focus on Life Leech and life regeneration as your sources of recovery. Elemental Equilibrium is similar to PoE1's version, but instead requires a specific damage type to then inflict the correct exposure. If you deal fire damage, you'll remove fire exposure and inflict lightning exposure. Cold damage will remove cold exposure and inflict fire exposure, while lightning damage removes lightning exposure and inflicts cold exposure. An important note here is that it looks like this keystone will no longer provide a larger exposure than other standard applications, and it will likely inflict a 10% exposure as long as that remains the default exposure applied by non-specified sources. This keystone will be very strong if you're able to inflict ignites with cold damage, if something like the Elementalist exists in PoE2. Heartstopper has moved to the middle between the Dex and Dex int star locations, and it's been changed quite significantly. It now lessens damage over time taken by 75% if you've started taking damage over time in the past second, but makes it so that you take 50% more damage over time if you haven't started taking damage over time in the past second. The use of this keystone will reward fast response times to moving out of damaging areas or cleansing damaging ailments, to ensure that you're never taking damage over time for longer than a second, preventing the downside modifier from proccing. Remember that this keystone doesn't track each damage over time instant separately, and instead just checks if you're taking any sources of damage over time. For example, let's say you get inflicted by a bleed which barely deals any damage to you but lingers on you for a long while. If you step into a damage over time ground effect and the bleed has been on you for longer than a second, that means you're no longer considered to have started taking damage over time in the past second, and you now have the downside modifier active on you, and you'll be taking 50% more damage over time from all sources, including both the bleed and the ground dog. The upside of this keystone is incredibly powerful, but the downside is equally as devastating if you fail to notice a damage over time effect on you, so you need to be very careful when using this one. Next is Acrobatics, which also finds itself between the Dex and Dex in starting locations, right on the outside of the tree. Acrobatics changes the type of hits that you can evade, from being just projectiles and strikes, to now also including previously unavailable area of effect hits, but it does so at the cost of causing you to lose half of your evasion rating. The downside of this keystone is absolutely brutal, but its effectiveness really relies on how much evasion a character is reasonably expected to obtain. This keystone is likely to be very powerful in boss fight situations where you now have the chance to evade powerful slams, and a lot less powerful in a standard mapping setup, as in those situations your evade chance will be much lower against far more incoming hits. Eternal Youth finds itself moved all the way across the other side of the passive tree, in the middle of the Dex int aligned portion of the tree. This one makes recharge from the energy shield mechanic apply to life instead, while making life flasks recover energy shield instead. Now this can be quite a powerful keystone if the mechanics of life recharge function as they do in PoE1. Taking damage to energy shield while Eternal Youth is allocated in PoE1 will not stop or prevent life recharge from starting, and if this function still exists in PoE2, using your life flask to keep your ES topped off to always buy time for life recharge to begin could be quite strong. However, do keep in mind that energy shield's base delay before recharge begins is 4 seconds in PoE2, up from 2 seconds in PoE1, but you can of course still invest into modifiers to speed this up. Chaos Inoculation finds itself in the same location in PoE2 as it was in PoE1, and it also does exactly the same thing. Your maximum life becomes 1 and you're immune to chaos damage. In PoE2, a hit that would cause bleeding must deal damage to life to inflict that ailment, which means a character using Chaos Inoculation is effectively immune to bleeding. Chaos damage also removes twice as much energy shield by default instead of bypassing it in PoE2, but CI makes you immune to this damage type, completely negating that downside. At the same time, Poison bypasses energy shield by default in PoE2, but since Poison deals chaos damage, that also won't be an issue for a character using CI. Depending on what gear is accessible and if there's any powerful ascendancies that lend themselves well to making use of CI, such as the PoE1's Trickster, this keystone has a lot of potential to be really strong. Resonance is located close by and changes the types of charges you gain by changing one out for another. Power charges are gained instead of frenzy charges, frenzies instead of endurance charges, and endurance charges instead of power charges. This one will be one of those keystones which immediately enables a build or two in allowing you to gain a type of charge and spend that charge in a build that previously had a hard time in doing so. Keep in mind that charges in PoE2 do not grant any inherent stats and are used exclusively to empower ability usage. Speaking of charges, Conduit is located in the middle of the in and dex in starting locations and makes any charges you gain be gained by allies in your presence instead. Because charges no longer grant stats, this one is unlikely to be useful for any minion builds and is instead targeted at group play, allowing for a character to generate charges for their party members to quickly spend on powerful abilities. Eldritch Battery is in a very similar place to its location in PoE1, but its modifiers are massively changed. This keystone will now convert all of your energy shield into mana. That is wild. You know that in PoE2, mana is going to be much more of an interesting mechanic on the average build, as all characters will have access to their full mana pool to make use of unless they're using blood magic. Eldritch Battery is going to be a way for characters to gain incredible amounts of mana, which will be particularly useful with Mind Over Matter, which now makes 100% of damage be taken from mana before life. There's potential here for a character to use this keystone together with Chaos Inoculation and Mind Over Matter and completely focus on building a giant mana pool and having a large amount of mana sustain, as mana then becomes their only hit pool. However, just like with Iron Reflexes, it's important to mention the change to conversion. If non-damage conversion follows the same formula as damage conversion, the portion of energy shield converted to mana will not scale with any modifiers to energy shield, and will instead only scale with modifiers that would affect mana. Whispers of Doom now moves more towards the top middle of the tree and is now a keystone, providing the additional curse but doubling the standard curse activation delay. We know that curses in PoE2 will have an activation delay after they've been cast before they take effect. This keystone is very strong if you're able to apply curses using another method, such as with Blasphemy or Hand of Chayula to fully bypass the downside. Necromantic Talisman is essentially the same as Necromantic Aegis from PoE1, only it makes your amulet apply to your minions instead of your shield. We don't know too much about amulet modifiers in PoE2 or whether there are any interesting unique amulets to pair with this keystone, but the loss of the amulet slot in the context of PoE1 is quite significant in terms of scaling minion damage, so we'll need to wait and see what's available for this keystone. Ancestral Bond will completely remove the totem limit and make the only restricting factor for placing totems the amount of spirit you're able to acquire. Each totem place will reserve 100 spirit while it's active, which is around the same amount of base spirit that an automated meta gem will reserve. We don't really know much about totems other than the few attack totems we've seen. The interesting thing about the attack totems we've seen so far, both Shockwave Totem and Ancestral Warrior Totem, is that they both have their own base damage rather than using your weapon, which means you could theoretically use a one-handed mace and a scepter in your offhand for spirit gain to help enable this keystone. Mind Over Matter is pretty much located exactly where it was in PoE1, but it now makes all damage be taken from mana before life, essentially making your mana pool your primary focus for scaling EHP. downside of 50% less mana recovery is very significant, however, as this affects all forms of recovery over time, including regeneration, leech, and mana blast usage, unless it's instant. This new version of Mind Over Matter unlocks some synergy with the new Eldritch Battery and with Chaos Inoculation, a combo which previously didn't function together. Zealot's Oath also has significant changes. This keystone now makes excess life recovery from regeneration apply to Energy Shield, whilst preventing Energy Shield from recharging. What exactly is excess life recovery from regeneration? Well, this is likely to mean any time your life is full, your life regeneration is instead put to work to recover your Energy Shield. This is quite a powerful keystone for builds which have some Energy Shield but are also consistently in the thick of battle, such as a melee warrior who's unlikely to be buying enough time for their Energy Shield recharge to begin naturally. However, it's important to note that the actual amount of life recovery is applied to Energy Shield, not the modifiers themselves, meaning percentage-based life regeneration modifiers will still scale from your life, making this keystone considerably weaker in combination with Chaos Inoculation, outside of the use of flat regen modifiers. It also has significant synergy with the new Eternal Youth, as the downside of Zealot's Oath specifically prevents Energy Shield from recharging, but Eternal Youth makes life recharge instead, bypassing this downside. Lastly, Pain Attunement has moved far from the top right area to the outside of the Strength Int aligned area. Its modifiers are also massively changed. It now makes characters have 30% more critical damage bonus while on low life, but a 30% less critical damage bonus while on full life. We're not sure yet if abilities such as Petrified Blood will exist in PoE2, so the usefulness of this keystone will rely on mechanics that can force a character to be on low life, or to be considered to be on low life, to activate this upside. And there you have it, every keystone in Path of Exile 2's early access build of the game. There's some really interesting ones in there and some big changes from PoE 1 as well. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.
Certainly not supposed to be here. How exciting.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of of Exile 2, and I'm here today to talk about the Witch. Most classes have access to some kind of minion, but if you want to control an army, the Witch is probably the class you want to pick. In PoE 2, most minions don't require summoning manually. This scepter gives me a couple of free warriors, but it's also going to give me another resource called Spirit, which you can spend on whatever minions you want. You can see the Spirit bar above the mana here. On the skill screen, you can pick the composition of your army. This is a level 2 area, so I can only afford one other minion. I'll pick a sniper for now.
You can stay in the back with me.
When minions die, they'll be revived automatically so long as no other minion has died recently. So before your next battle, all your minions will come back to life. You can also order your minions around with a dedicated button. Tell them to move to a specific location, attack a specific enemy, or even open a chest or door for you. We also have temporary minions. This spell is called Unearth. If it kills a monster or if it hits the corpse of a monster, it creates these bone constructs. They can't take many hits and have a limited lifetime, but you can build up a real army with these. While my minions are attacking, I'm going to use some debuffs on the monsters too. The first one I'm going to use here is Contagion. If a monster dies with Contagion, it spreads to nearby enemies. Each time it spreads, the damage increases, so it's a good idea to try and keep the infection going. If any corpses are infected when you summon a minion from them, the minion will be infected as well. Each time they hit an enemy, they'll continue infecting them. It's nice to have an army of infected scorpions on your side. I also have another Chaos debuff called Essence Drain. This one does even more single target degen. If the monster is infected with Contagion at the same time, then the Essence Drain will spread as well. This can turn into a real plague of destruction. Another minion type I can summon are zombies, but they require a corpse.
These will do nicely.
They don't come back to life if they die, but they're fairly tough and can bolster your minion numbers. Many minions also have command skills. I can order my sniper to deploy a gas arrow on the battlefield to get some damage over time. Now I'm going to summon a skeletal arsonist. They can throw little fire grenades, but they also have a command skill that can detonate your own minions that are low on life. When you see the red indicator, use the skill and the minion will go boom. It's particularly nice on these bone constructs because they expire quickly anyway. So, let's take all these tools we found and fight the boss of this area, the Carrion Crone. So, that's how many minions you can get at level 2. But let's see what minion gameplay looks like at a higher level. This is a level 30 area. I want to try a different group of minions. I still have my trusty warriors, but there's a lot of different types to choose from, like brutes for stunning or ice mages for freezing, and most of them come with their own special abilities or command skills. For now, I'd like a couple of storm mages to shock enemies, a cleric to heal and revive my minions, and a bunch of reavers as well. Reavers do high damage, and you can also enrage them before battle. This slowly kills them, but my cleric should be able to keep them alive. While my minions are attacking, I can use channeled skills like Bone Storm, which creates a devastating volley of sharp spikes. The Storm Mage has a useful ability if lots of your minions die. He can summon a lightning storm to strike the location of every dead skeleton in your army. Just like that. We also have a type of skill called Offerings. These let you impale one of your skeletons on a big spike of bone in order to buff all of your other minions. The one I've just used here is called Pain Offering. It makes all of my other minions faster and deal more damage. After the battle, we have some extra corpses. We don't want those to go to waste. Profane Ritual consumes a corpse to create a power charge, which can power up some of my other spells. If I use them to summon zombies, I can create super zombies, which are more powerful. You also don't need a corpse to summon them. I can also use power charges to channel Bone Storm. If I do that, it adds a devastating AoE. In PoE2, even non-boss monsters can be pretty devastating, like this Faradin Impaler. There's a wide variety of abilities and is pretty tough to defeat. But maybe I can put the body to a better use. This is a Bind Spectre gem. Using it, I can take the body of any enemy and capture its spirit so that I can keep it as a minion. Any monster can be captured, but the spirit cost depends on how powerful the monster is. It takes a lot of spirit for such a powerful enemy, so I'll have to unsummon a lot of my other minions, but it certainly seems like it might be worth it. If the Spectre dies, just like any other minion, it will respawn after a short time. So, I think it's time to fight the boss of this area, Tor Gull the Defiler.
You are relentless, and that makes you predictable. The end of Marraketh's tyranny is nearly at hand.
Is a Bind Spectre. In PoE2, even non-boss monsters can be pretty devastating, like this Faradin Impaler. But maybe I can put the body to a better use. This is a Bind Spectre gem. Using it, I can take the body to a better use. This is a Bind Spectre gem. Using it, I can take the body of any enemy and capture its spirit so that I can keep it as a minion. Any monster can be captured, but the spirit cost depends on how powerful the monster is. It takes a lot of spirit for such a powerful enemy, so I'll have to unsummon a lot of my other minions, but it certainly seems like it might be worth it.
Give me your essence.
If the Spectre dies, just like any other minion, it will respawn after a short time.
Let's talk PoE2 Witch today, because the minion system is straight amazing. I got to play the Witch early at Gamescom. That's what the gameplay behind us is. And I kind of want to give you a feeling for how she plays in the early game, how the minion system works, and then we'll take a peek together at the Ascendancies. I started the game and instantly stumbled up in two spells, a Scepter with Ray Skeletons, and also the Unearth spell. Unearth being super amazing fun. You shoot these bone spikes out of the ground to damage everyone in front of you, and if you kill an enemy, their corpse will be turned into these bone constructs that fight on your side. Essentially start into the game and already have a little army running with you. As I then enter the encampment, I talk to the blacksmith and get my first skill gem. And here you can already increase your army of minions. My choices were between the contagion spell, Skeletal Warriors, or just add Skeletal Snipers to the fray. And that's where the new spirit system comes into play. Because you have to choose how many Skeletal Warriors do you want, how many Snipers do you want, and they each have a respective spirit cost. You don't start with a lot of spirits, you can't go with 20 minions straight away. The further the game progresses, the more spirit you get, the better items you find, the more spirit you get. Each minion does also come with their spirit you get, the better items you find, the more spirit you get. Each minion does also come with their very own specific ability. I choose the Skeletal Snipers, the Archers already, and they could drop this Poison Bomb from the sky. That means I can unearth Poison Bomb, and my skeletons get automatically summoned. If they ever die in combat, I don't have to look for any corpses or anything. If a boss blasts them away, it doesn't matter. They get resummoned after a time. Then I found my first support gem, and you can juice up your minions with this. Multiple poison damage, have them also break the armor, or for example, have your minions explode when they reach low life. Quite some fun choices already early on. And the gameplay felt pretty good from the very early beginning on. You have your minions, you make new minions with your Unearth, and if you choose to kill someone with Chaos Magic and then raise his corpse with the Unearth, you would keep spreading the Chaos Magic to everyone like a goddamn wildfire. Your minions are also very aggressive going forward, taking the aggro. Yes, if I do run in, I will get in, but it didn't feel like my minions were getting ignored like in other ARPGs and I was getting the hell beaten out of me. Now this is obviously the very early start of the Witch, but she has so much more amazing stuff to come down the line. Just listen to Jonathan about Spectres.
This is a Bind Spectre gem. Using it, I can take the body of any enemy and capture its spirit so that I can keep it as a minion. Any monster can be captured, but the spirit cost depends on how powerful the monster is. It takes a lot of spirit with such a powerful enemy, so I'll have to unsummon a lot of my other minions, but it certainly seems like it might be worth it.
This will be the main fun with playing the Witch and minions, choosing what your army should be. Snipers, warriors, mages, archers, specters. What are you taking into battle with you? And this is not even looking at the ascendancies right now. There we'll have two choices. One is the Infernalist, and the other one is the Bloodmancer. No, there won't be a Necromancer ascendancy that you can skill in, and there's actually a very good reason for it. They want each ascendancy to work with minions. That you're not being pigeonholed in, you have to be a Necromancer. So you can be an Infernalist with minions, and you can be a Bloodmancer at the end that's also using minions, and it all kind of works together. Let's watch the ascendancies together and talk about the skills. Let's start with the Infernalist, and we'll stop at the skills to talk about them.
Witch can ascend into the Infernalist or the Blood Mage. As an Infernalist, she can summon a loyal Hellhound companion. The Hellhound sets enemies on fire, as well as taking a percentage of the damage if the Infernalist gets hit.
To be precise, 20% of the damage from hits is taken from your Hellhound's life before you. That is very important, especially with the demon form that we'll get to. This is bonus to all your minions. Essentially, an even bigger minion army by adding Oil Hellhounds to it.
With Pyromantic Pact, you can turn your mana into Infernal Flame.
Instead of mana, you have Infernal Flame. Casting spells will now stack up Infernal Flame instead of depleting mana. There's a caveat to that. Take maximum life and energy shield as fire damage when Infernal Flame reaches maximum. That means overflowing it might not be the best idea. And as you overflow it, lose all Infernal Flame on reaching maximum Infernal Flame, resetting it to 0. Ergo, you make it max, you take a chunk of damage, and then you start from 0 again. You do want to keep at a certain level though, 30%. We'll get to that. If you don't cast a spell in the last 2 seconds, 10% of Infernal Flame will be lost per second, slowly depleting. You technically don't have to cast all the time, because you have your army of minions with you as well. Now, why do we want to keep a certain level of Infernal Flame?
As you cast more spells, the flame builds up, and if it overflows, you'll take damage. Using Bringer of Flame, you'll want to make sure you keep the flame stocked up. While your Infernal Flame is above 30%, all damage from you and your minions will ignite enemies.
Perfection. Just have enough Infernal Flame, and suddenly your whole army turns into a infernal, burning army that just does fire damage to everything. You unearth, you summon these unearthed constructs. Well, those are your minions too. But there are suddenly fiery unearthed constructs that will just burn, and you can make them explode too. Fantastic.
She can also transform into a literal demon. While in demon form, she takes an increasing amount of damage, but her cast speed and damage increase rapidly as well.
As we mentioned, this is why there's no Necromancer. They want you to give something bonus on top of what you're doing. Imagine you're just playing your minion army, but you want to. You could transform into a demon and then just wreak havoc on the battlefield. And there's even a good consideration with your minions together with this.
So if you're planning on transforming into a demon, make sure you stack a lot of life cover.
Because you take good damage in demon form. You take increasing damage in demon form. If you then choose your minion army to be defensive, a lot of skeletal warriors instead of mages, archers, arsonists, whatever, they'll be soaking up the damage that you're then not taking, together with your Hellhound soaking up damage that would be taken, that you can then demon form as hard as possible on top of your minions.
She can also become a Blood Mage, a master of life and energy. All Blood Mages must pay the price of making skills cost life as well as mana.
Grant skill life remnants, skills gain a base life cost equal to a base mana cost. From this point on, you're essentially soaking your life empty to deal damage, bringing us back to a defensive minion army that you kind of want to be not taking any bonus damage, because you want to use that one to just cast more spells.
But in exchange, every monster they kill will drop life remnants, which allow them to quickly gain back damage.
That's the Blood Orb, that's the life remnant. So if you kill things, you or your minions kill things, you'll be able to soak back up on life by running through them. And they're pretty vibrant, so you shouldn't be missing them.
With Crimson Power, she can gain large amounts of extra life, and with Vitality Siphon, she can use her spells to leech life back as well.
Because Vitality Siphon is simple, 10% of spell damage is leeched as life. Do damage, get life back. Use life to do damage to get life back. Infinity Loop. The second one, Crimson Power. Gain energy shield from equipped body armor as extra maximum life. Your body armor has energy shield on it, you just gain more max life to be able to dish out more damage, because there is also damage that scales with the more max life you actually have.
What's it cost? Use Gore Spike.
Gore Spike, 1% increase in critical strike damage bonus per 20 life. Which is meant to get more life, juice out crazy amounts of damage.
So critical hits deal incredible amounts of damage. A monk.
And this is just scratching the surface of what the witch will be able to do. Not talking about offerings where you can impale your actual minions to give bonuses to everyone, curses, more chaos spells, contagion, hexes, everything. The witch will be a very varied class that promises overall good fun in many directions. Keep in mind, the Ascendancy cannot be switched right now. Devs are actually in hardcore talk about this. So you get to choose to be an Infernalist or to be a Bloodmancer at a certain point. You cannot retract that decision. What you can do though is at any point refund any skill point in the passive tree. So try out minions, don't like that, do something else. You want to rather go for more full gameplay, you want to go into that chaos magic, no problem. Refund all your nodes for gold and try a different company. Everything is open for you. I hope you're as excited for the witch as I am because I'm absolutely stoked. If you want more information about Path of Exile 2 and that it's definitely not too complicated, enjoy the video, have a fantastic good time, live streams, guides, everything will be following here. Goodbye.
Thưa các bạn, các hình ảnh vệ tinh mới cho thấy đảo Trito đang trở thành một trong những căn cứ do thám chính của Trung Quốc trên Biển Đông. Đảo Trito là một thực thể thuộc quần đảo Hoàng Sa và nằm gần Việt Nam nhất. Hòn đảo này chỉ cách đất liền của Việt Nam khoảng 136 hải lý và cách đảo Lý Sơn của tỉnh Quảng Ngãi khoảng 121 hải lý. Việc Trung Quốc thiết lập hệ thống radar trên đảo Triton sẽ có tác động như thế nào đến Việt Nam? Trước khi đến với phần phân tích, mời các bạn theo dõi hệ thống radar khẩu độ xung lực tổng hợp có uy lực như thế nào. Uy lực của hệ thống SIA. Hệ thống radar chống tàng hình trên đảo Triton có cấu trúc hình bát giác, giống hệ thống SIA cũng do Trung Quốc xây dựng trên đá Subi ở quần đảo Trường Sa vào năm 2017, theo Viện Nghiên cứu Chatham House của Anh. Hình ảnh cũng cho thấy một cái tháp đang được xây gần radar SIA, có thể là trung tâm vận hành. Theo nghiên cứu của Phòng Thí nghiệm Vật lý ứng dụng Đại học Johns Hopkins của Mỹ, năm 2020, radar SIA phát ra một lượng năng lượng tương đối lớn. Một số nghiên cứu đã xác định radar là nguồn chính của các trường bức xạ cường độ cao, có thể gây nhiễu cho hệ thống điện tử hàng không, dẫn đường và thông tin liên lạc của máy bay. Đảo Hải Nam cách đá Subi khoảng gần 1.000 km, còn đảo Triton nằm ở giữa, cách đảo Hải Nam chừng hơn 300 km và cách đá Subi chừng hơn 600 km. Một khi được hoàn thành, hệ thống radar khẩu độ xung lực tổng hợp SIA trên đảo Triton sẽ góp mặt để hình thành một mạng lưới gồm ít nhất 3 hệ thống radar chống tàng hình trên Biển Đông mà Trung Quốc đã thiết lập trong thập kỷ qua.
SIA được các nhà khoa học cho là thuộc Quân Giải phóng Nhân dân Trung Quốc PLA, phát triển từ giữa thập niên năm 1990. Điều thú vị và cũng đáng lo ngại về hệ thống này là nó phát sóng và truyền ở tần số rất cao. Phổ tần số vô tuyến không chỉ dành cho người nghe bình thường, bao gồm FM, mà còn bao gồm cả hàng không, vũ trụ và các hoạt động truyền nhận tín hiệu khác. Các hệ thống radar quân sự có xu hướng không hoạt động trong phổ tần số vô tuyến đó, một phần bởi vì có rất nhiều tiếng ồn. Tình trạng đó có thể làm phân tán các tín hiệu, làm gián đoạn chúng và giải tần số sóng cao VHF, có nghĩa là sẽ gây ra sự thiếu chính xác cho tần số VHF. Đó là lý do tại sao các công ty radar đã thiết kế radar của họ hoạt động ở phổ tần cao hơn trong phổ tần số, chẳng hạn như UHF hoặc cao hơn. Ở các phổ tần rất cao này, radar thường chính xác hơn và tỉ mỉ hơn trong việc xác định các vật thể trên bề mặt và trên không. Xét trên nhiều phương diện, nó cũng rất đáng sợ. Hệ thống này đã được tinh chỉnh đến mức có thể giúp radar không chỉ xác định chính xác máy bay tàng hình thế hệ thứ 5 và thứ 6, những loại máy bay chủ yếu được các cường quốc phương Tây sử dụng, mà radar này cũng đủ tối tân và chính xác để dẫn đường cho tên lửa hướng tới các mục tiêu đó. Do đó, hệ thống này có chức năng kép. Trạm radar được xây dựng trên một khu vực như đảo Triton sẽ không đứng một mình. Trạm radar này sẽ bao gồm thiết bị vô tuyến để liên lạc với hệ thống radar, nhưng cũng có thể sử dụng cho hai hệ thống khác. Đầu tiên, chúng có thể gây nhiễu tín hiệu đến. Trong trường hợp này là tín hiệu của Việt Nam hoặc Philippines. Nhưng chúng cũng có thể được sử dụng để nghe lén, còn gọi là tình báo tín hiệu. Vì vậy, việc nghe lén các thông tin từ Việt Nam, từ giao thông thương mại, hải quân, quân sự và như chúng ta biết, hệ thống radar trên đảo Triton và các cơ sở vô tuyến nằm gần một trong những cảng chính của Việt Nam.
Báo cáo của Chatham House cũng trích lời ông J. Michael Dam, nhà nghiên cứu cấp cao về không gian và Trung Quốc, từ Viện Michel phân tích.
Các radar CIA bị giới hạn tầm nhìn do độ cong của vỏ trái đất. Điều này có nghĩa là có một khoảng trống do thám không phận bên giữa đá Subi và đảo Hải Nam. Hệ thống radar trên đảo Triton sẽ giúp lấp khoảng trống này.
Nhà nghiên cứu Grigory Polin, giám đốc Trung tâm Đông Nam Á từ Trung tâm Nghiên cứu Chiến lược và Quốc tế CSIS của Hoa Kỳ, nói với BBC News tiếng Việt vào ngày 26 tháng 10.
Hạ tầng do thám trên đảo Triton cũng giống như những gì Trung Quốc đã làm ở Biển Đông, và cho thấy họ đang ngày càng áp đảo về năng lực radar trên tuyến hàng hải này. Trung Quốc là quốc gia duy nhất có thể giám sát hầu hết những chuyển động trên biển hoặc trên không ở Biển Đông và có thể đáp trả theo cách mà họ muốn.
Các chuyên gia nói với BBC rằng hệ thống radar trên đảo Triton có thể được dùng để can thiệp hoặc gây nhiễu hệ thống thông tin liên lạc quân sự và dân sự, hệ thống điều khiển hàng hải dân sự và quân sự của Việt Nam, cũng như có thể thu thập thông tin tình báo. Sự xâm lấn rộng hơn của Trung Quốc có thể khiến các phương tiện của các quốc gia khác đối mặt với nhiều rủi ro khi đi qua vùng biển giữa Việt Nam và Hoàng Sa. Cụ thể những tác động này như thế nào? Mời các bạn tìm hiểu qua phần nhận định của các chuyên gia. Nguy cơ nào cho Việt Nam? Giáo sư Alexander Vuvin từ Trung tâm Nghiên cứu An ninh châu Á-Thái Bình Dương Daniel K. Inouye thuộc Bộ Quốc phòng Mỹ đánh giá với BBC News tiếng Việt vào ngày 26 tháng 10.
Tác động lớn nhất sẽ là việc Trung Quốc có khả năng phát hiện các động thái của Việt Nam trong một phạm vi rộng lớn hơn, bao trùm toàn bộ miền Trung của Việt Nam. Trước đây, trạm radar của Việt Nam ở bán đảo Sơn Trà cho Việt Nam một lợi thế về thông tin và quan sát tại khu vực giữa Biển Đông. Nay với trạm radar của Trung Quốc trên đảo Triton, lợi thế đó đã chuyển sang Trung Quốc.
Bán đảo Sơn Trà thuộc thành phố Đà Nẵng được xem là khu vực phòng thủ trọng điểm của Việt Nam, nơi có trạm radar được gọi là mắt thần Đông Dương. Cổng thông tin điện tử thành phố Đà Nẵng vào ngày 18 tháng 3 năm 2024 viết:
Trạm radar 29 thuộc Trung đoàn 290, Sư đoàn Phòng không 375 là trạm tiền tiêu có vị trí trọng yếu, đặc biệt quan trọng về an ninh quốc phòng của thành phố Đà Nẵng nói riêng và cả nước nói chung. Được mệnh danh là mắt thần Đông Dương, có nhiệm vụ cảnh giới và theo dõi không lưu của toàn bộ vùng nước Biển Đông và bầu trời Việt Nam. So với Hải Nam thì Triton rất mới. Nó tạo thành một điểm nút mới nữa trong mạng lưới radar, nhưng nó là tài sản mới cho Trung Quốc ở Biển Đông, xét về năng lực tổng thể. Đảo Hải Nam đã từng là trung tâm của các hoạt động quân sự. Vì thế, hạ tầng kỹ thuật thông tin liên lạc và radar, cũng như hạ tầng chỉ huy và kiểm soát ở đảo Hải Nam sẽ phức tạp và tinh vi hơn nhiều. Nhưng đây là những thứ khác của cái mà chúng tôi gọi là cơ sở định vị tiền phương. Đó là những cơ sở vô tuyến radar nhỏ trên các thực thể rải rác ở Biển Đông. Ở đây tôi sử dụng thuật ngữ các thực thể, vì hầu hết các thực thể này không thực sự là đảo, chúng là bãi cạn. Đây không đơn thuần là các điểm nút trong mạng lưới do đảo Hải Nam kiểm soát.
Việc Trung Quốc xây dựng các công trình do thám trên đảo Triton sẽ làm giảm đáng kể khả năng hoạt động bí mật của Việt Nam trong khu vực, theo đánh giá của Chatham House. Viện nghiên cứu Chatham House cho rằng hệ thống radar hiện hữu trên đảo Triton đã có khả năng theo dõi tàu bè trên biển. Sắp tới với hệ thống radar mới, Trung Quốc sẽ có khả năng theo dõi các di chuyển trên không, phát hiện từ sớm nhất cử nhất động của Việt Nam trong khu vực này, bao gồm hoạt động tiếp cận các mỏ dầu khí trong khu vực. Tuy nhiên, tiến sĩ Kolinko cho rằng hệ thống radar CIA trên đảo Triton cũng có điểm yếu. Đó là dễ lộ sơ hở và dễ bị tấn công và hoàn toàn nằm trong phạm vi tấn công tầm xa của Hà Nội.
Xét về địa lý, hệ thống do thám trên đảo Triton nằm ở những khu vực không có chiều sâu chiến lược về phòng thủ. Nói cách khác, Chúng dễ bị phát hiện và dễ bị đối thủ tấn công. Khác với các hệ thống ở xa hơn, chẳng hạn xung quanh các khu vực ven biển ở đất liền như thành phố Trạm Giang, tỉnh Quảng Đông, hoặc thậm chí là đảo Hải Nam, các cơ sở quân sự trên quần đảo Hoàng Sa không được xem là an toàn trước đối thủ trong thời chiến. Chúng nằm gần các vị trí quân sự của Việt Nam và nằm trong phạm vi của một số hệ thống tấn công tầm xa quan trọng của Việt Nam. Đặc biệt là tàu ngầm Kilo của Việt Nam được trang bị tên lửa hành trình đối đất Club S, đóng vai trò quan trọng trong cách tiếp cận A2, AD, tức năng lực chống tiếp cận, chống xâm nhập.
Thưa các bạn, nhìn ở bệnh viện rộng lớn hơn, liệu tình hình Biển Đông có nhiều chuyển biến trong nhiệm kỳ thứ hai của ông Donald Trump hay không? Mời các bạn cùng đến với phần nhận định của tiến sĩ Benjamin Sachs từ Rand Corporation. Biển Đông sẽ thế nào trong Trump 2.0?
Biển Đông sẽ vẫn là một mặt trận ưu tiên đối với chính phủ Hoa Kỳ bất kể ai đang ngồi trong phòng bầu dục. Tại sao? Bởi vì các chính quyền tiếp nối ở Nhà Trắng và Bộ Quốc phòng đã xác định Biển Đông là một trong những mặt trận ưu tiên, nếu không phải là nơi được ưu tiên hàng đầu. Và rõ ràng là chúng ta không muốn chứng kiến căng thẳng leo thang thêm nữa. Tôi hình dung rằng các chính quyền tổng thống Mỹ sẽ tìm cách tiếp cận quan hệ. Đó là mối quan hệ nồng ấm của họ đối với Philippines và có thể là với Việt Nam nữa. Trong nhiệm kỳ đầu của ông Trump, chính phủ Mỹ đã có những nỗ lực về mặt ngoại giao với Chủ tịch Trung Quốc Tập Cận Bình, với Tổng thống Nga Vladimir Putin và cả với Triều Tiên. Và điều đó gợi ý rằng chính quyền Trump sắp tới có thể sẽ sẵn sàng hơn trong việc đạt được một đồng thuận chung với Trung Quốc ở Biển Đông. Và cả Bắc Kinh và chính quyền Trump có thể sẽ ưu tiên các cuộc đàm phán song phương mà không có sự tham gia của ASEAN, đặc biệt là Philippines và Việt Nam, để tìm ra một thỏa thuận chung liên quan Biển Đông.
Trong bối cảnh tranh chấp ngày càng phức tạp, vào năm 2002, ASEAN và Trung Quốc đã ký tuyên bố về ứng xử của các bên ở Biển Đông DOC. Đây là văn kiện chính trị đầu tiên mà ASEAN và Trung Quốc đạt được có liên quan đến vấn đề Biển Đông. Năm 2013, Trung Quốc và ASEAN đồng ý bắt đầu những cuộc tham vấn chính thức về bộ quy tắc ứng xử trên Biển Đông giữa ASEAN và Trung Quốc COC. So với tuyên bố DOC, bộ quy tắc COC được coi là có tính ràng buộc hơn. Tuy nhiên, quá trình đàm phán luôn bị trắc trở, có khi trở nên căng thẳng cùng những thời hạn luôn bị dời lại. Do đó, bộ quy tắc COC đã qua nhiều lần lỗi hẹn sau hơn 10 năm đàm phán.
Đàm phán giữa Trung Quốc và ASEAN đã được thực hiện trong nhiều năm qua, nhưng hai bên chưa thể chốt lại do còn bất đồng về việc COC có nên mang tính ràng buộc hay không. Trung Quốc cảm thấy rằng thỏa thuận này nên mang tính tự nguyện, và các quốc gia ASEAN cho rằng COC nên mang tính ràng buộc hơn. Trong cùng một vấn đề tương tự, Trung Quốc muốn đàm phán song phương với từng quốc gia ASEAN, trong khi ASEAN muốn đàm phán với tư cách là một hiệp hội chung. Đối với Trung Quốc, tất nhiên điều này có thể khiến Bắc Kinh gặp bất lợi. Vì vậy, một lần nữa chúng ta sẽ phải xem chính quyền tân tổng thống Mỹ có thực sự ủng hộ hay sẽ lờ đi chuyện hoàn thiện bộ quy tắc ứng xử này.
Thưa các bạn, tình hình Biển Đông dự báo sẽ còn nhiều phức tạp khi Manila thông qua đạo luật vùng biển của Philippines. Trước đó, Trung Quốc đã đưa ra tuyên bố về đường cơ sở lãnh hải xung quanh bãi cạn Scarborough. Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục cập nhật về tình hình Biển Đông trong thời gian tới, cùng những chuyển động trong khu vực. Cảm ơn các bạn đã dành thời gian theo dõi. Trân trọng kính chào.